Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Pilot Principle, the podcast where we take a look at just the first episode of a series, the pilot, and then use it to decide if we should watch the entire series. On this episode of The Pilot Principle, we are chatting episode 1 of Netflix's new spy thriller series, Black Doves. When a spy, posing as a politician's wife, learns her lover has been murdered, an old assassin friend joins her on a quest for truth and vengeance. Come on, crew. Come on. Does it have to be said? A drama starring Kiera Knightly, Ben Whishaw and Sarah Lancashire? A spy thriller? You think I'm not going to watch it? You're mad. You're actually out of your mind. Of course, I was always planning to watch Black Doves. Everything about it ticks all of my boxes. Before we take a look at the pilot episode in a bit more detail, let's go through some pilot logistics. The pilot is titled To Love Them, and the pilot synopsis tells us that when politician's wife and undercover spy, Helen Webb, learns that her lover has been murdered, the Black Doves recruits an old friend to help protect her. We have an episode length of 55 minutes, a series length of 6 episodes, and of course this is being shown over on Netflix. The pilot was written by Joe Barton, who also serves as the series creator, as we've seen is basically the norm. So Barton has also created the series Giri/Haji and The Bastard Son and the Devil Himself. Barton has also written episodes of The Lazarus Project, which, as you know, was one of my faves and was just cancelled way too soon. The pilot episode was directed by Alex Gabassi, and Gabassi has directed episodes of The Crown, Raised by Wolves, and The ABC Murders, which, if you ask me, is probably one of the best recent Agatha Christie miniseries adaptations. And I will hear nothing said otherwise. Moving on to cast, we first have Kiera Knightly, who plays Helen, and Knightly has starred in Pride and Prejudice, the 2005 Joe Wright version, the best version. She's also starred in Pirates of the Caribbean and Boston Strangler. Ben Whishaw plays Sam, and Whishaw is known for, or maybe he's not known, maybe you don't know this, but he's actually the voice of Paddington. Yeah, soak that one in. And Whishaw has also starred in Women Talking, and he played Q during Daniel Craig's time as James Bond. And finally, on the selected cast list, we have Sarah Lancashire as Mrs. Reed, and Lancashire has starred in Happy Valley, Last Tango in Halifax, and Julia. I'm actually very excited because we finally get to play another game of 6 Degrees of Separation, and we're going to use all 3 actors, so Kiera Knightly, Ben Whishaw and Sarah Lancashire. I'm not going to lie, the Sarah Lancashire link took me the most amount of time to figure out, but I'd say that I made all 3 connections in about 3 minutes. So feel free to pause right here and make your own links before you hear how I connected all 3 actors. Okay, here we go. So Sarah Lancashire was in Happy Valley with James Norton, who was in War and Peace with Jessie Buckley, who was in the film Misbehaviour with Kiera Knightly, who was in Love Actually with Hugh Grant, who was in A Very English Scandal with Ben Whishaw. Again, it's the Sarah Lancashire bit that took me a long time to figure out. I think I got the Kiera Knightly Ben Whishaw connection in less than a minute, but let me know how long it took you and if you managed to connect all 3 actors in the same way I did or in a completely different way. I know, after all of that excitement, the pilot also stars Andrew Buchan as Wallace and Andrew Koji as Jason. I could also kind of connect these 2 actors, but honestly, don't get me started because I will do this forever. If you've made it this far, then please make sure to give this pod a follow. The end of the year is in fact nigh, and I would love to kind of reach my audience goal by that point. So thank you very much if you're already following, and thank you very much if you've just followed. We've talked about cast, we've talked about crew, we've had a fun little game. Now it's time to talk about the first 10 minutes of episode 1. Why the first 10 minutes, you wonder? Well, because the first 10 minutes is supposed to tickle our fancy and convince us to keep watching. In fact, I was recently at a talk with someone on the team at BBC Writers' Room who do an open call looking for new scripts every year. And so they get about 5,000 people entering their competitions, including myself. And essentially what the person at the talk said is that the reading team read the first 10 pages of every person who submits, and then based on that alone, they whittle it down to a few hundred who then go on to get full reads. So yeah, those first 10 pages, those first 10 minutes are incredibly important. And the first 10 minutes of Black Doves goes like this. It's Christmas in London and Jason is being followed. He makes 2 paranoid calls as he walks around London asking people who they've spoken to and insisting he is being followed. The 2 people on the other end of the phone are murdered and Jason knows he's next, so he makes a call to a contact saved as a soft play and kind of leaves like a goodbye voicemail. But before he can say I love you, he is shot dead. Then we get the title card, Black Doves. Off the back of that, we are in Rome and we have a very brief introduction of a man sat alone having a glass of champagne. This is Sam, and Sam gets a call from Mrs. Reed, which at first he ignores, but after multiple calls, he reluctantly answers. Back to London and we meet Helen, and she is the wife of the defence secretary with a beautiful home and 2 kids. She's the ultimate hostess at the family's annual Christmas party, but when a woman in a chic but kind of witchy hairstyle arrives and crashes the party, Helen claims not to know her. Of course, Helen is a big fat liar. She covertly steps aside from the party to talk to this woman who is Mrs. Reed, her boss and or handler. Now, Mrs. Reed bluntly informs Helen that Jason is dead. Helen tries to act indifferent about the news, but Mrs. Reed tells her to cut the bullshit. She knows all about the affair Helen has been having with Jason, who worked for the Ministry of Justice. The 2 of them have kind of a lovely tussle of words, and Mrs. Reed chastises Helen for potentially compromising the work of the agency, aka Black Doves, and then Helen tells Mrs. Reed that if she's going to pull her out of the operation, then she's taking the kids with her or she'll cut a bitch. My words, but Helen's intentions, because she literally pulls out a switchblade and I don't know where from, but it's absolutely glorious. Mrs. Reed tells her to watch her back, not in a threatening way, in a literal way, because if somebody killed Jason, then she could be next. And that is about the 13-minute mark. And as an intro, we've got excitement, murder at Christmas. I'm not going to lie, the Christmas thing threw me. I don't know, I just didn't see that coming. It's Christmas now, it's Christmas there. Ugh. So yeah, that was a nice surprise. And then we've got a splash of daily life. We see Helen in her absolutely gorgeous home. And then we've got a bit of intrigue with the whole Helen and Mrs. Reed foreplay. What's their dynamic? It's kind of weird. It's kind of cool. Who's the boss? It's effective. And essentially, I want to keep watching, which is what you want from the first 10 minutes. Now, there are 2 main characters in Black Doves, Helen and Sam, and it's an interesting one because we don't get much from either character, but at the same time, there are certain characteristics there to be mined. So take Helen, for example. On the surface, she has this easy presence. She walks around like she was born to run a grand home, to marry an influential man and naturally have twins. Of course, that's just one side to her. The other side is a spy, and even in that, she's excelled. She is her organisation's line to the goings on in Downing Street via her husband, who is the Defence Secretary. Helen is so integral to her company, she is essentially indispensable. However, beneath all of that overachievement, Helen wants more. She wants something for herself. And I believe that's why she had the affair and fell in love with Jason. And it's why she's desperate to avenge him, to sort of break out of the norm, to stop ticking boxes for other people and to have something for herself. However, a spy is a spy is a spy, and now there is a crack in her perfect facade, and we are kind of just waiting for it to break and see if she can handle the fallout. Then, of course, we have Sweet Sam. Sam, I believe, is part of the hit person. Department of Black Doves. He is quiet but also direct, and he has been running from his past, from whatever happened that made him leave London 7 years ago. When we first meet Sam in Rome, he is sat drinking alone and watching two people flirt, and there is this sort of wistful nostalgia come jealousy there. We learn later on in the episode that he was in love and it ended badly, and that despite his cool cynicism, he just wants to be loved and likely accepted for who he is / what he does. Sam and Helen are kind of like bickering siblings. There's clearly a kind of love and respect in their relationship. However, spies do be spies. And Helen says to him when he arrives back in London, "You know, I thought if I ever saw you again, it would be to retire me," aka I'm running a hand across my throat. And then Sam says to Helen, "You know, I'd never take that job unless the money was really good. You know, ha 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 ha." But also that kind of stinks of foreshadowing. And now it is time for a quick interlude to see what film and TV life is looking like beyond the pilot principle. And of course, we start with books. So actually, there's quite a lot to run through book-wise. I'm actually very proud of myself. All of you doubters out there who are like, every week we're reading the same book. Screw you, okay? So since we last spoke, I finished reading Bride by Ali Hazelwood. Not great. It's essentially just a romance book pretending to be a supernatural book. After that, I read The Very Irregular Society of Witches by Sangu Mandana. And then I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. And I'm currently reading Hellbent, which is the sequel to Ninth House, also by Leigh Bardugo. And I've cracked the spine on the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. Yes, I know we're gearing up towards Christmas, but I'm clearly still in the mood for supernatural, dark academia fantasy, so we're just going to go with it. And also, screw you guys, because I'm a reader. Now moving over to film, and I actually haven't done that well. So recently I watched Our Little Secret, which is the Netflix Lindsay Lohan movie. And I would say it was probably one of the better Netflix Christmas movies from this year thus far. In fact, when it comes to film, I don't think there's a lot left for this year in cinema. I know on my list of films to watch are Kraven the Hunter, you know, for the plot, for the Aaron Taylor Johnson plot, and also Baby Girl, I think, is also pulling me in to maybe see what's happening there. And I also might try to watch Queer if that comes out somewhere around me. And over in TV land, I finished watching series 1 of Spooks. And I just remembered that the ending was a real cliffhanger, so I need to go and make time to go back to that. I then picked up and then put back down The Madness, which is the new Coleman Domingo thriller series on Netflix. If you've watched it, let me know what you think, because I watched episode 1 and I was just bored very quickly that I was like, what is even the point of even going to watch episode 2? So good thing I didn't end up podcasting about that. Otherwise, I'm currently watching Man on the Inside, also on Netflix. Another one that I watched the first episode of and I was a bit like, meh. And somebody said, stick with it. It's actually quite good and heartwarming. And I was like, sure, it can be a lunchtime show. It's only half an hour. And thus far, I've actually laughed a few times and I'm quite, okay, I'm invested. I'm 5 episodes deep. I'll let you know if it's worth it at the end. But yeah, so far it's definitely picked up. And finally, I've watched the first 2 episodes of a really old police drama series called River, which was recommended to me to watch. It's got, Daddy Skarsgård. Not that, not like that kind of daddy. I just mean Skarsgård Senior, like the dad. So Stellan Skarsgård. And my fave, Nicola Walker. So I'm only 2 episodes out of 6 deep. So I will let you know how that goes. But yeah, so far I'm intrigued. And finally, a little bonus one for you. I've also listened to a fair few podcasts, which is unlike me because Ironically, I don't listen to that many podcasts. Although technically the first one is less of a podcast and more of an audio series, and that is Secret of the Riddler, which is kind of the follow-up to Batman Unburied in a way, or same universe. It's the same universe as Batman Unburied, but I had to listen to that because Batman Unburied, Fallen City, was coming out soon. So I basically listened to both of those audio series back to back. I've also been listening to The Rest is Entertainment. I sometimes see clips of theirs over on social media, which intrigued me enough into actually listen to the podcasts. And I like them because they're not long. I think that's the thing with me in podcasts and why this podcast is so short. I really can't listen to podcasts if they're longer than 45 minutes at the absolute max, which is why I like The Rest is Entertainment podcast. And finally, the last podcast that I've been listening to, which I have been listening to for a few years, I just dip in and out, and that is 60 Songs That Explain the 90s. And I recently listened to the episode on Destiny's Child's Say My Name, so that's always fun. I really like the podcast host. Yeah, and that's it. That's everything I've been up to. I know it's been a while, peeps. Yeah, life be lifing. My bad, but it's all right. We're back. We're here. We're talking pilots. We're having a good time. And on that note, let's get back to talking about the pilot episode of Black Doves. Before we get into talking about the end of episode Hook, let's quickly round up the story elements that were given in the pilot episode. And that is through the A plot, the B plot, and the C plot. And essentially the A plot is the most important storyline, the one that's given the most amount of time weighted towards it, followed by the B plot, and then subsequently the C plot. So the A plot is who killed Jason and why. So Helen is having an affair with Jason, who worked for the Department of Justice, and claims to her boss, Mrs. Reed, that she wasn't working an angle, it was love. We also know that Jason was speaking to a journalist and a jewelry store assistant before he died. In fact, all three of them were murdered at the very start of the episode. And it is possible that whoever was after Jason is also after Helen too. In fact, it's more than possible because in the pilot episode, we see two women pretending to be police officers come after Helen, who, I will say, puts up a pretty good fight. Then we've got the B plot, and the B plot is essentially how did the Chinese ambassador die? I know this sounds kind of random, but in the first literally 10 seconds of the pilot episode, the news is on in the background of a pub and it's telling us that the Chinese ambassador is dead and that there is an inquest going on which showed that he died of an overdose. However, it unfurls in the pilot episode that this isn't necessarily the case and the UK government are hiding something from the Chinese government, and now the Chinese government are mad, and this somehow has a knock-on effect with Helen's husband Wallace, who is of course the defense secretary or something. We also learn that Jason, who is Helen's lover, ex-lover, because, he's... well, before he died, he was calling the Chinese ambassador's currently missing daughter, which kind of makes the B plot feed into the A plot. And finally, we have the C plot, which is why did... I want to say Ben, but that's not his character's name. That's the actor's name. Sam. One-syllabled names. Why did Sam leave London 7 years ago? Now that you've got all of that as a context, let's move over to the end of episode Hook. So, Sam has found the name and address of the person who shot Jason, and he's parked outside Helen's house for the two of them to go on a little road trip to maybe do a bit of pew, pew, pew. And then we have Helen, who is suiting up. So she's, transforming from housewife to spy. Also, at the end of episode Hook, the news shows that the Chinese government are angry at the UK government because they lied about how the Chinese ambassador died. And also at the end of episode Hook, it's noted on the news that the ambassador's daughter is currently missing. And Wallace, who is Helen's husband, is watching all of this play out on the news and he's like, shit. So it's bad news for him for some reason. Politics, am I right? So here's what I think we're looking at for a series arc. Of course, who killed Jason and why, and how is this connected to what's happening with the Chinese government? Also, what is Sam and Helen's past? They give friend vibes, but also colleague vibes. They've definitely got a shared past, and this may or may not have something to do with the reason that Sam disappeared 7 years ago. But he also never told anybody where he was. But he was clearly willing to come back from whatever pit he'd buried himself in for Helen. So, yeah, I think their relationship will become a bit more clear. And of course, there is that a little bit of foreshadowing that we got there. They both seem a bit like high achievers. So if push came to shove, which one would be pulling the trigger? And finally, over the course of the series, we will watch and find out whether Helen's position as a wife slash mother will become compromised. To be honest, in terms of like series predictions, I don't have any like deep, dark thoughts. I kind of think that Wallace's new secretary will have something to do with something. I don't know, there was a look. Also, I think Wallace might actually be a bad guy or have done a bad thing. Perhaps he was the one to, make the call to pull the trigger to kill Jason to bury the dog that lay in the house that Jack built. Like, I don't know. I think it's the actor. Something Buchanan? Anyway, him. I think he's done a few roles where we think he's the good guy, but he actually turns out to be the bad guy. So perhaps that's also going to be the case here. And I guess if we're just going to get a bit crazy, perhaps Helen is secretly pregnant with Jason's baby. Just for a bit of pregnancy drama. But I don't know, that feels a bit EastEnders. I hate a pregnancy trope. I really hope it doesn't go that way. Now, in terms of ultimately what made episode 1 of Black Dove stand out to me in a good way, I think they managed to do a lot of setup without feeling too overwhelming. I think it almost was. Almost. But they handled it well by sort of teasing the audience with certain bits of information instead of completely bombarding us. I think Christmas as a backdrop was unexpected, but also kind of worked. I don't know why I found that a bit wild that it was Christmas. I can't get over it, but it's a good hook. Why not? And finally, I think that we saw Helen's character transform over the course of the episode in the best way. We saw her act as mother slash wife, and then we saw her start to flex those spy muscles by doing a bit of investigation herself into what happened to Jason, even though she was told not to. And then at the end of the episode, we see her fully committing to the role, getting out her guns and putting on a sexy trench coat. In terms of what let the pilot episode down, though, I would say that it did lag a bit in those last kind of 15-ish minutes. Sam, who of course hasn't been to London in 7 years and apparently stopped speaking to absolutely everybody in that time, randomly bumps into an old friend, and he goes to their house and he talks about his past relationship, and we sort of get a hint of what may have gone down between him and his ex-love. And I don't know, it's not like I didn't care, but I don't know, I think it was just a bit weirdly structured. So we had all of this action, and then we stopped for ages to have this backstory, emotional, sentimental chat, and it just felt a bit like somebody hit the brakes and we've just lost all this momentum. Okay, crew, you've got a bit of a choice to make now. So based on everything I've said thus far, I think you should watch Black Doves if you like a spy drama. Naturally, I mean, spy dramas are almost a bit like crime dramas. There's always something to solve. If you like solving puzzles, hun, this one's for you. Secondly, if you like characters with a bit of depth and grit, it's not like they were born the second you press play on this episode, then I think you'll enjoy Black Doves, because literally in episode 1, I feel like we get so much nuance and layers to both Sam and Helen, and that's in less than 55 minutes. That's great. And finally, I think if you enjoy a little violence as a cheeky side dish to your shows, then yeah, I think Black Doves is the direction for you. It's not too bloody violent, but there's a little something. Now, on the flippity flip side, here are some reasons why I think Black Doves may not be for you. Firstly, if you hate Christmas as a backdrop, I don't know what to say, but that's okay. Perhaps you just want to feel sort of timeless when you're watching shows. I suppose if you get really anxious when the main characters put themselves in dangerous positions or keep big secrets, then you might not like Black Doves. And finally, I'm really reaching for these last two. If you don't like cross-genre programs, because Black Doves is a Christmas spy action thriller, which, might be too much to digest for some. Oh, actually, a quick bonus. Now, I know some people find Kiera Knightly annoying, right? That's a thing. I am not one of those people, so I can't personally speak on that. However, I kind of understand the sentiment. I too have actors who I just find annoying for absolutely no reason whatsoever, Anya Taylor-Joy. But I think it's worth noting that there was something slightly less annoying about Kiera Knightly in this pilot. I think it's the way she was speaking. I don't know. But now you know, so if that helps sway you one way or another. The last thing for me to do is to give the pilot episode To Love Them, to Leave Them, a tisket, a tasket, a brisket or brasket. What? Doesn't matter. So I will be giving the pilot of Black Doves a pilot score of 3 out of 5. Now, don't get me wrong. It works as a good setup for the series, and I am curious to find out more. But the structure isn't balanced. It kind of goes from action to everyday in a way that feels really abrupt. And yeah, that was really off-putting for me. But ultimately, I do care about Sam and Helen, and I want to see how their stories and their relationship progress. Another one for the watch list. Thank you for joining me this week. Let me know if you will be starting or continuing with Black Doves. Don't forget you can comment directly on this episode if you are listening on Spotify. Or of course, you can hit me up over on Instagram and Twitter at Pilot Principle. This is normally the part where I tell you what we're going to be talking about on the next episode. But it's not just that I don't know. It's just that the last time I said what we were going to be watching / reviewing, the show didn't even bloody come out in the UK. It only came out in the US. So that was very annoying. So I guess you're just going to have to tune in, and I will catch you on the next episode.